My name is Jon McCullough, and I actually first came to NTCC. The exact day was August 31st, 1992. I was graduating college. I was in town for 4th of July party with somebody, and somebody said, "Hey, there's a college here that has an opening for a counselor." And I said, "I didn't know there was a college in Mount Pleasant." And so about 2 weeks later, I got called for an interview. 2 weeks later after that, I came back and started my first day of work. So I came here because I was looking for a job and they had a job opening. I started off here as a communities and schools coordinator. So as my first job, I worked at Mount Pleasant High School. And a lot of people don't know this, but the college used to have what was called a PASS program, which was an alternative high school. So we had that out here on the college campus. And so I was the advisor and the counselor for students in the PASS program. And then from there, I became the director of student activities at the college. At the same time, I was director of student housing. Then I became the assistant baseball coach. And then I went from there to coaching the women's softball team. And I did that for about 3 years. And then, so I was doing student activities, women's softball at the same time. And then I went into development. We opened a development office at the college, which was fundraising. And so from then on, I've been in the fundraising field. I'm the executive vice president for advancement. And I guess an easy way to look at that, a lot of people don't have any idea what that means, but advancement means I'm over different areas at the college that advance the college forward. For example, I'm over all fundraising. So we raise money for all the scholarships. We raise money for extra things, try to raise money for building projects, things like that. I'm over the Watley Center. So I'm over all the director of the Watley reports to my office, and that's community relations there. We do it a lot with people in the Watley with the performances of people who never come to college. They're not students. They're just community members. There's a big correlation between community members at the Watley Center and fundraising. A lot of those people who come to Watley events are the same ones who do scholarships at the college or establish scholarships. Then I'm over athletics at the college. So I have a background in coaching, and so the athletic director reports to me. And then I'm also over the Carroll Shelby Automotive Program, the Carroll Shelby Automotive Institute. So I'm more the liaison between our college and the Shelby International in Las Vegas. I have a good relationship with them. And then just over special events and special projects. One change is, even though we do a great job with student life, it used to be everybody that came to this college was at this college all day long. Now, because of online, because of dual credit, because of just mobility and the different things available, there's just not as many people on the campus at any given time as it used to be. It used to be hard to park out here. Now it's easy to park out here. We've got plenty of parking spaces. So, but the college still is working to try to create it to where we want people to want to hang out here, because we know that if students like yourself will get engaged in something, regardless of what it is, student organization, athletics, tutoring center, mentoring, just hanging out here, they'll be more successful if they'll get engaged in something other than just going to class. A funny story that I always remember and always tell, and it's about a college president that was here when I was here, and he passed away not too long ago, Dr. Charles Florio. He and I did a whole lot of fundraising, a whole lot of visiting people early on. And one time we were going to visit this lady. Her name is Mrs. Watley, and you may recognize that name because you've heard of the Watley Center. You might have heard of the Hoggett Watley Ag Complex across the road. Both of those are named after her and her family because of the magnitude of the gifts she gave to the college. So she called one time and said that I want to give y'all a gift, and I was going to wait till I died to give it to you, but I'm going to go ahead and give it to you. And Mrs. Watley and I had a great relationship. So when we got there, she always wanted me to come sit next to her, and she said, "John, come over here. I want you to sit next to me." And I went and sat next to her, and she said, "We'll give you this check." And Dr. Florio was looking at me. He wanted to know. He told me, he said, "I think it's going to be at least $300,000. And where he got that figure, I don't know. But so I got the check and I looked at it, and he looked at me and I went, and he goes, and kind of gave a nod back like, okay. And I was acting like it wasn't what he expected. So we talked a little bit more, and I just let it go on. He was still happy we were getting a gift. Don't get me wrong. He thought it was going to be 100,000 plus. And by the expression on my face, he thought, well, it must only be 10,000 or 20,000, which is a great gift, by the way. But as we're talking, she asked, "We want some tea or something?" I said, "Yeah." And then somebody brought us some tea. So I went and handed Dr. Florio his tea, and I gave him the check folded. And he kind of casually, he didn't want to look like a vulture, and like, how much that check? So we're still talking. He has a check in his hand and he opens it like this. And he looks down and he looked back down again. He went, and he looked at me and I started laughing. It was $1.7 million. And he thought when he was looking at it, he read $170,000 and he had to reread it. And we never told Mrs. Watley about that, but he and I always had that joke. He said, "Why did you do that to me?" And I said, "I don't know. It was just, I thought it was funny." That at that time was the biggest one-time cash gift that a community college in the state of Texas unrestricted cash gift had ever received. So it was great. That was a great gift. The stories that are the better stories are when a student comes into my office. There was a young lady from Pittsburgh a few years ago, and her mom had bought a restaurant. And she came into my office and she was struggling in school. And I said, "What's your major?" She said, "Business." I said, "Well, tell me what you're going to do with your business major." I said, "We've got a scholarship for you." And I said, "Tell me what you're going to do with your business major." She said, I want to learn how to run a business. She said, "My mom is the best cook in the world." She said, we bought a restaurant. She said, "We failed miserably business-wise. Nobody knew anything about business." And she said, "My goal is to get out with a business degree, help my mom turn around and start another restaurant instead of going bankrupt in one because nobody knew how to do the business." And so I asked her, I said, what do you need for your college? She said, "I'm going to have to take out a student loan." I said, "How much are you going to take out?" She said, "I think I'm going to need about $3,500. And so I said, "Well, somebody called from town. They want to cover your scholarship." And she just started bawling right there. And that was about 7 years ago. And she and her mom have a restaurant today. There's so many of those stories, and those are the real stories. Just a little impact here, a little impact there. And all I get to do is do the fun stuff, be the liaison between somebody who's wanting to help somebody and somebody who needs some help. And, I get to be one of the people at the college that gets those two things together. And it's always fun. I mean, it really is my life. I'm not the type of person that I believe you should work all day long, all night long, all weekend long. I believe you should work your work hours, work as hard as you can, go home and have a home life, have a family, have everything else, keep them separate. And NTCC has been a great place to work because it's allowed me to do that. But in all honesty, it's become a part of my family. I mean, both my daughters went to school here. They came out here when they were kids, played, sometimes, did all the scare affairs, did everything that we try to do for our community. My kids also experienced that. My wife experienced that. But something that's very important to me is every day on my way to work, that's my prayer time. So you think you've been working here for 33 years. That's a lot of prayers. And I always pray for the college, the students at the college, in addition to everything else. So that's a small thing. That means a lot to me about the college. A few years back, we had a Biggers art exhibit. We had some Biggers art and a few other people. We got some on loan and we did an exhibit, an art show in the Watley Center. We do a different art show each year. And when we did this one, somebody came to the art show. And this gentleman called me from Tyler, Texas, and he came and he said, "I was in town over the weekend. I came out to the college. I visited y'all's art show." He said, "I love Biggers art and I saw what y'all had." And he said, "I know y'all have some on campus." He said, "Did you know the biggest piece of Biggers art, one of the most valuable pieces of Biggers art, is hanging in the library at Pewitt? It's not conducive to people being able to go in and look at it, but yet it's hanging there. And it needed to be renovated." So he said, "If you'll go talk to the people at the school board and the community and ask them if it would be possible for the college to display that piece of art, then I'll help you get it renovated." I had to first off see if it could be moved because it was so fragile. It was painted in 1955, so the piece of art was very old. And so we found a curator and we found a restoration specialist from the Dallas area. And then she called me about 3 weeks later and said, "We can restore that. And here's what it's going to cost." So I called the donor. And I said, "Okay, I've got good news and I've got maybe not as good a news." And I said, "The good news is I found somebody who can restore that mural." I said, "The not as good news is it's going to cost $110,000. And he said, "When can they start?" And he paid for every bit of that. So Pewitt, we got it restored. It's on loan to the college for 30 years. And so we own it, we insure it, and more importantly, we display it for the public. And it's one of the coolest things. There was a local lady from Mount Pleasant who had a bunch of pottery, and what she did not want to happen was she did not want that pottery to be spread out, distributed, and sold on the black market. What she wanted to do was find out if we could take the pottery, if we could house it, and if we could turn it into something that we can use as a learning, educational experience for students. So we worked with her, and in order for her to give us that pottery, she had to have it appraised and she had to have it authenticated. And so we had to hire a group from the University of Texas. They came here and they authenticated each piece of that pottery. They were here for about a month is what it took. What I did not know, though, was this. We could not legally display Caddo pottery without approval from the Caddo Nation. And so I had to go to Binger, Oklahoma, which is where the Caddo Nation is. I had to meet with the Caddo chief and ask if we could display the pottery, because we don't really own that pottery. The Caddo Nation owns that pottery. Because we're an educational entity and because we said we're going to use it as an educational experience for all the people in our community, they gave us written approval to display the Caddo pottery. So she donated it to us. She wanted this pottery to all be together, because if you look at it in the pottery, all of it has little signs with it. We've got a book that identifies each piece. It all comes from about 30-mile radius of Mount Pleasant, Texas. We have the largest local intact collection of Caddo pottery in the world. Happy 40th anniversary, NTCC.